Be a brief snapshot in Jewish history. So we'll see how far we could get. What do you guys say about that? Okay, so first of all, this is the Bar and Bat Mitzvah class, and the goal of the class is to give like a framework or a structure for all things Jewish. It's an overview, it's a sketch of the major core concepts of Judaism. Now, why would you include history? History seems like a nice art. It's like a nice thing that you could study, but how does it benefit and what's its place in any exploration of core topics in Judaism? That's a good question. So I like to look at it from a few different angles. I think, first of all, history is important to learn because...
don't repeat.
Yeah, go ahead. Don't
repeat the mistakes of the past.
Yeah, that's what they always say. They say that those who don't learn the lessons of history are bound to repeat them. And in Jewish history, there's many, many patterns that emerge again and again. And we can look at the situation that we have today, and we compare it to, let's say, what happened in the first century of the Common Era in Israel, and it's literally identical. Tomorrow, the Israeli populace is going to the poll, and it's the factionalism and sectarianism and schisms and different groups and the different ideas and different themes that are going to the polls tomorrow are literally the same exact as existed 2,000 years ago. And the lessons of what happened, what transpired in yesteryear, if we transpose them to today, it can be very valuable for us. So that's number one. Number two, I think we talk about history as being the battleground or the battle testing station for ideas. If I told you 100 years ago, there's two major economic philosophies out there: there's communism and capitalism, right? You would probably have the proponents of either one split 50-50. Amongst the Jews, there were many more communists than capitalists. That was a legitimate argument 100 years ago. Today, it's not. Do you know why? Because history has made it clear, the past 100 years of history has made it clear, one system works, for better or for worse. For the most part, it works, and one of them is an absolute failure. There's a reason why the Soviets had to have their soldiers keeping people in, while the United States has struggled to keep people out. If it's just a haven for the people, you wouldn't have to force everyone, put guns to them, make sure they don't escape. So that's the idea. We talk about, Jewish history. There's so much detail and so much nuance and so many different ideas that are presented throughout Jewish history and are revisited again and again. And the more we gain an insight into the various ideas that have been tested, the better off we are at judging current ideas and the likelihood of success. For example, just a contemporary example. So we don't like talking about different groups amongst Jews, but it's a reality we all know. You Google it, the different groups. There's conservative Jews and Reform Jews and Orthodox Jews and Reconstructionist Jews and this Jews. Every different kind of Jew to find on the internet, right? Just go to Wikipedia. Different kinds of Jews. You'll find 78 different options. Now, that's not a new idea. It's not a new idea. Go back to 2,000 years. You have the Sadducees. You have the Pharisees. You have the Essenes. You have a group that we find a lot in Jewish literature, not so much in secular literature. The group called the Baitusim. We have groups called the Sicarium and the Brionim, different groups, and many of them purported or argued or posited or postulated for different ideas. The Sadducees or the Hellenists, the Jewish Hellenists, right. They have a lot of ideas that were hugely popular. The Sadducees were an enormous faction amongst the people. And where are they now? They're gone. Why are they gone? Because those ideas are flawed, and flawed ideas eventually filter out. And we see even 150 years ago in France. So the early Reform Judaism is not what Reform Judaism is today. Early Reform Judaism, they had the synagogue open on Sunday. The rabbis dressed like priests. There was absolutely no Hebrew or any sort of reference to any Torah. It was completely indistinguishable from a church. Read about it in Germany and France in the late 19th century. So that was an idea that was very popular. In the 19th century, you have 250,000 Jews converting to Christianity. The worst century out of all 38 centuries of Jewish history for Jewish continuity, for Jewish vibrancy, for Jewish growth is the 19th century, by far and away. Now, the reasons why I want a big picture here, we're getting a little off topic. course, we like to do that here. Big picture reasons why is because you have global movements or global shifts in society and culture, and you have the emancipation of the European Jews, and you have the Enlightenment, and you have the full manifestation of humanism that began in the Renaissance. And lo and behold, lots of Jews say, you know what, we can't keep our payas and our Judaism and all that. We'll be different. We won't be accepted into society. So some of the Jews say, let's meet them halfway. Some of the Jews says, you know what, we can only integrate into society if we become Christians. Thus, you have someone like Benjamin Disraeli, became Prime Minister of England, converted, baptized. You have someone like Karl Marx, same thing. And even Theodor Herzl, his kids, two of his kids and one of his grandkids were baptized as Christians. And that's obviously a terrible tragedy. But it is an idea that was not brand new. It was tried before, and it failed, and it was tried again, and it failed again. That's an example of a big theme or big shift, a big directional shift that a mass of Jews have taken. Yet if they had a deep understanding of Jewish history, they would know that it was bound to fail. It's clear, it's evident. And we find that again and again. Additionally, we could talk about the lessons that we take from the mistakes of Jewish history. We try not to do them again. So that's another reason why it's very important to do that. Now, in the Torah, we find a lot of stories. The word Torah means teachings or instructions. Thus, anything that falls under the category of Torah must, in some capacity or other, be a teaching, be an instructive. Well, there's 613 mitzvahs, direct commandments. Wear tefillin, have a mezuzah, eat matzah. Those are the ones we're familiar with. But if you open up the Torah, if you open up the Genesis, what do you find? How many mitzvahs do you find in Genesis? Who knows? How many mitzvahs are there in Genesis? The book of Genesis, first of the 5 books of the Torah. Out of 613, who wants to venture a guess? 13. That's the guess, 13, 600 the rest of them? In fact, there's only 3 mitzvahs.
Wow, that's pretty close.
There's only 3 mitzvahs in Genesis. Those 3 are be fruitful and multiply, circumcision, and not eating the Giranach, the sciatica. Those are 3 mitzvahs in Genesis. You have an entire book. In fact, Genesis is the largest of the 5 books of the Torah. Mm-hmm. And it's called Torah, thus it's supposed to be instructive. It's supposed to be instructive, and we find only 3 instructions. What gives? Rabbi, you said Torah is instructions. Where are the instructions? So the answer is that the dialogues and the narratives and the stories of Adam, of Abraham, of Jacob, of Noah, of Joseph, of Isaac, of Joseph's interactions with the Egyptians, all those stories are instructive. We have to glean the stories from them. Nachmanides, one of the paramount commentators in the Torah, says, "Ma'aseh avot siman labanim." He says it again and again and again. Stories of our ancestors are directives to the children. The stories in Genesis are not merely stories that we need to tell our kids, but the kids sleep at night. Rather, they are lessons that are entrenched, ensconced, and embedded in Jewish consciousness. And they have provided much insight and illumination to Jewish practice throughout the millennia. In fact, Talmud tells us that even 1,500 years after Jacob, 1,500 years after Jacob is dead, the rabbis, a coalition of rabbis, are going to Rome to negotiate with one of the emperors. I don't remember who it was. It might have been Domitian, or it might have been Nerva, or it might have been one of those other clowns in the end of the 1st century, the Common Era. And what they do before they went to negotiate, to lobby the Romans, what they do, what they study. How to win friends and influence people. The Art of War by Sun Tzu. Well, what they study? They studied Jacob's encounter with Esau in the middle of Genesis. Right? Jacob is coming back from his 21-year stay by his father-in-law. He has messengers that tell him that Esau is coming towards him with an army of 400 men, and how he goes about preparing, and his contingency plans, and his taking the people and splitting them into different groups, and his prayer is prepare for war, and also sending gifts. Right? All that was studied 1,500 years later before the rabbis made their trip to Rome. It's an example, but that's only one. You have Abraham, the lessons that we take from Abraham. How much literature has been written about all the nuances and the subtleties of Abraham's behavior, Abraham's faith, Abraham's kindness, Abraham's benevolence, Abraham's beseeching the Almighty on behalf of the wicked the wicked city of Sodom and Gomorrah, or it's pronounced in Hebrew, Amorah. All that is lessons for us. So we study history. It's also about that. It's also about taking lessons from our great forebearers and the great Jewish leaders of yesteryear. Lastly, this is perhaps most important. We view history as an exercise in faith. Repeat that again, guys. We view history as an exercise in faith. How so? According to Jewish philosophy, the Almighty God, creator of heaven and earth, is not merely defined as a creator. In fact, if you say, I believe in God, full faith, right? According to Judaism, that has to encompass some more than just the idea that God created the heaven and earth. If someone says, you know what, I believe God created everything, from the most simple organisms to all the galaxies, everything. However, God went and pushed the button autopilot, and now he's playing War of Warcraft. Yeah, right? God disassociated himself from humanity. According to Judaism, well, you don't have faith. You don't believe in what we're talking about. It means we mean a very specific thing. We're talking about God. We don't just mean, I believe in God, whatever that means. What if God means, I don't know, it can mean anything, right? It's just a word. What is the definition? So we say creator of all, right? Nothing self-created, right? Besides for everything was born out of God's willing it to exist. Number one. Sustainer. Nothing can outlast, or nothing can live on its own. Thus, as an analogous to a lamp. So a lamp's illuminated, but you pull the plug, illumination ends. So there's this constant flow of electricity that keeps it illuminated. What happens? You pull the electricity, illumination is gone. Similarly, God is constantly giving us, nurturing us, sustaining us with energy, with life, and thus we continue to exist. He withholds that for a second, we cease to exist. So God's like, so to speak, recreating us every second. We also say God's a supervisor. God's involved with us on an individual level. If someone says, I don't believe in that, then they're reneging or they're repudiating on a major principle of Jewish theology, of Jewish faith. So back to history for a second here, guys. I feel like I'm losing the crowd here. Back to history. We say history is God's handiwork. God manipulates history. There's a course of action that God's trying to evoke or bring out throughout history. There's a plan, there's a master plan, and God manipulates and supervises and intercedes with the happenings of the world to bring about that desired outcome. Thus, when we, for example, just to shoot ahead 1,500 years, we talked about the first exile, right? Everyone knows there's 2 temples, right? Solomon built the temple in Jerusalem. It was destroyed by who?
By the Romans.
Incorrect.
Babylon.
That's right. Babylonians. Nebuchadnezzar.
That's right.
Nebuchadnezzar. So the Romans, you said Romans, Persians, they were the Purim story. They were afterwards.
After Babylon.
That's right. Right. And we have the Assyrians before that.
Right.
Assyrians, Babylonians, Persians, and we have the Greeks, and then we have the Romans, the Byzantines.
And that do with that Shemitah year during that time?
Oh, Shemitah is something else.
I mean, during that time.
Yeah, of course they had Shemitah, of course.
I mean, they
Shemitah even today.
For those 70 years because they didn't know the language.
Yeah. See, good stuff there. Good stuff there. Frederick. I'm not going to pronounce it wrong. So we find... So Nebuchadnezzar is coming to destroy the temple, the Babylonians. Babylon, by the way, is in modern-day Iraq. And he initially comes and takes 10,000 of the best and brightest of the Jewish people and exiles them to Babylon. And the Jewish people at the time were freaking out. Can you imagine all the doctors and lawyers and all the accountants and all the rabbis, all the good, like all the, the creme de la creme, the high society, they're all gone, exile. And what happened? You have a temple here, we got no one to run the show. All the best advisors are gone. 10 years before the temple being destroyed. 10 years later, temple's destroyed. The entire mass of the people taken to exile to Babylon. That's what you have there. We're sitting on the rivers of Babylon and we're crying. That famous verse, right? How can we sing the song of God on foreign land? Right? That's when that happens. But they come to Babylon. What do they find in Babylon? They find a fully functioning, vibrant Jewish society. There's schools, and there's shuls, and there's mikvahs, and there's kosher butcher shops, everything. Why? Because those 10,000 came and reestablished a Jewish community in Babylon. So now when the entire masses of Jews are absorbed into Babylon, they don't come there, and they don't encounter a community that's not ready for them, and then they're at risk for assimilating. So in Jewish, the Talmud says, this is an example of God interfering and intervening in Jewish history to preserve the Jewish people. God knew that the temple is doomed. That was already a given. The temple was an edifice of wood and stone, but God's presence had left from it. To the naked eye, it looked like it was in the full glory, but God had left already. It was just a matter of time. What's going to happen to the Jewish people once they're sent into exile? What's going to be with them? Are they going to disappear? So let's take another contemporary example. What happened in the 1880s, the first major mass migration from German and Russian Jews to the United States. So they come to the United States. What do they find? They find a land with absolutely no Jewish infrastructure. Nothing. No shuls, no schools, no Jewish day schools, no Jewish butcher shops, no Jewish infrastructure, nothing. No federations, no synagogues, no bagel stores. And what happens to those masses? Alarming assimilation. Alarming. And that's very unfortunate. A lot of those Jews are lost from the people because it's been so long and they've been living as Gentiles for so long. So that's an example of the former as being part of God's master plan. So whenever we study Jewish history, we are always cognizant of this idea that we're not only studying a story, but we're looking at God's handiwork. Is there a question there? Okay, let's continue. Have any of y'all here ever heard of the idea of 6,000 years? Have you heard that? There's a 6,000 year limit, or 6,000 year, from Adam. Now, importantly, whenever we talk about dates and especially count Jewish years, so the Jewish year that we're in right now is the year 5,775. 5775. That's easy to remember. 57, like Heinz ketchup, and then just the opposite, 75. Or just remember it. So yeah, we've all heard. So what does it mean? 6,000. So it's important. What we are counting from Adam. That's when the clock starts ticking. What happened before Adam? Whether there are a billion years before that, whether 6 days before that, whether there's 13.8 billion years, that we don't know. We have a description of 6 days of creation, and we have the sun being created on day 4. So you have 3 days there that there's days, but there's no sun. And additionally, we have on these days an enormous amount of productivity happening. For example, Adam is created at midday on day 6, so midday on Friday. And by Shabbos, so by evening, Eve's created, they have mated, they have had a child already, multiple children. Okay, they have already sinned with the sin of the Eitz Hadas. Clearly, that's more than just 4 or 5 hours of time to have children, and they're already walking on their own. So, what does it mean? It's one of the great mysteries. But when we talk about counting the years of Jewish history, we start from Adam, and thus we have 5,770 years when you add up all the years that Adam lived, and Noah, and Abraham, to contemporary times. So we have 6,000 years. So what does it say about 6,000 years, and how is it relevant to big picture Jewish history? So the Talmud tells us, this is in the book of Sanhedrin. Everyone here familiar with the term Talmud? Mm-hmm. Talmud is a collection of books, 63 of them in total, comprising basically the collective wisdom, knowledge, law, philosophy, theology, everything of Judaism. It was originally compiled in a shorthand form, the Mishnah, just comprising the laws, by Rabbi Judah the Prince. Hear that name. Remember that name. In fact, if you open the Talmud, it says, Rabbi said so-and-so. He says, wait a minute, there's lots of rabbis. Which rabbi? It says Rabbi Akiva, is Rabbi Meir, is Rabbi Tarfus, Eliezer. Which rabbi is it? When it says rabbi, it doesn't say which rabbi. It means referring to Rabbi Judah the Prince, because his contribution to Jewish continuity was so significant that the entire Jewish nation christened him as rabbi. He's the rabbi of the Jewish people. Thus, when it says just rabbi, it means Rabbi Judah the Prince. He authored the Mishnah. He codified the Mishnah in collaboration with 60 other rabbis. 1,000 rabbis. Published with 1,000 rabbis in about the year 200. And the Talmud in its entirety was compiled by Rabbi Rav Ashi and Ravina. This is in Babylon. This is called the Talmud Babli, Babylonian Talmud, about the year 500, along with Rav Ashi's son, whose name was Mar. So the Talmud tells us in the book of Sanhedrin, I believe it's 97, 98, somewhere around there. If you didn't make Sanhedrin, I can find a few exactly. So it says, Shis Alfin Shana Hava. It's talking about the length of the world. How long is the world? How big of an exercise, an experiment are we talking about? So it says the world's for 6,000 years. 6,000-year world, that's it. 2,000, the first 2,000 is called chaos. Tohu, chaos. First 2,000 years is chaos. The next 2,000 years, from the year 2000 to the year 4,000, is called Torah. That's the era, the epoch, epoch. And the last 2,000 years is Mashiach. So what does this mean? So we meet a fellow by the name of Abraham. Abraham arrives the year 1948 from Adam. That's from the Jewish calendar. When Abraham is 52, he starts studying Torah. Thus, exactly the year 2000 marks the end of chaos. What does chaos mean? Confusion. What does confusion mean? Lack of clarity. What does lack of clarity mean? It means lack of clarity. It's a trick question. Right? There is 2,000 years of chaos. What's chaotic in the world? What's chaotic is the fact that the world is fundamentally flawed. What's the fundamental flaw in the world? What's lacking? What's not here? What's invisible in the world? What's the major flaw in our universe? God is not present. You can live your entire life, you're breathing, your heart's pumping 87,000 times a day, only because of God. Your body has this magic factory, magic machine called digestion, which magically is able to absorb all the nutrients and extract and take all the way. It's just magic, straight up magic. And it's all God's doing. And your liver is able to filter, world greatest filtration device. In fact, if you didn't have a liver, you drink a cup of coffee, you would just die. And you have a brain, most complex organ ever, just we can't even figure out. Even today, our knowledge of the brain is so simple, so rudimentary. It's like the only thing we know about the brain is which parts are active when you're experiencing emotions or thoughts. That's all we know. We talk about the medulla and this and the frontal lobe. They know nothing. They have no idea how it works. Literally. All we know that there's trillions of little connections. It's brilliant, you know. God everywhere, but God hidden. The world's flawed. The world's chaotic. Comes along Abraham. What does Abraham do? Abraham emerges in a world of paganism, in a world where people blatantly reject the idea of an invisible, all-powerful, omnipotent God. And what does he do? He ends the chaos. He begins the process of fixing the world. We talked about Tikkun Olam. Who here heard that term by raise of hand? Show of hand. Tikkun Olam. So Tikkun Olam is a major Jewish idea. It means fixing the world. The world's flawed. Why is it flawed? Because God's not there around. Right? Us humans are also considered a world. Right? In Jewish scholarship, the word Olam Katan means small world, and it's a reference to man, human. When I say man, I mean mankind, humans. We're also flawed because on a much smaller scale, we're an entire ecosystem. But we're also flawed because where's God? You know, we live your whole life with rejecting that idea. So there's the personal and there's the collective. The global a broken world. And it's broken until Abraham shows up. And what does Abraham do? He kickstarts the plan of fixing this world. So the 2,000 years of tohu, of chaos, end with Abraham starting to undo that, starting to repair, starting to fix. The idea, the radical idea at that time, slowly gets a foothold with Abraham. What happened to the entire chapter of human experience, of human history, closes and the new chapter opens, and that's Torah. We have 2,000 years of Torah, 2,000 years of taking the idea, the crucial idea of monotheism, which is basically God's brain, right? Mm-hmm. And the greatest tool of connecting to God in the world. And that starts with Abraham. Abraham's able to learn Torah. How that happens is one of the great questions. Talmud, in fact, asked, from whence did Abraham study Torah? Remember, Torah was delivered by Moses at Mount Sinai many, many generations later, like 6 generations to be precise. Mm-hmm. So how does Abraham study Torah? Wait a minute. If Moses got the Torah at Mount Sinai in Exodus chapter 20, I think. Yeah, 20, chapter 20. Abraham appears way before that, hundreds of years, in fact. And he studied Torah. How did he study Torah? And in fact, the Talmud tells us not only did he study Torah, he also studied rabbinic law. Mm-hmm. So, of course, you can say, wait a minute, Abraham's a prophet. Prophets, by definition, are spiritually rooted, thus do not have the same rigid, fixed finiteness or rigidity of physicality. Thus, he's able. That's what a prophet means. Someone who's able to. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Well, not Time Lord. He's just he tapped into his spiritual entity.
An angel.
Well, no, it's not like the Matrix because what's the problem with the Matrix? The Matrix is. Okay, let's stop here for a second. Here. Let's try to clarify some misconceptions. Yeah, but
because the Matrix was so clearly the story, a metaphor for the story of Jesus. Oh yeah.
So, well, let's clarify some misconceptions. If I were to appear in a Jewish court of law and say, "Gentlemen, God spoke to me, I'm a prophet," you know what they'll do to me? They wouldn't say, "Oh, tell us more. Let's hear what he told you." They would right away execute me. You know why? Because I'm a false prophet. False prophet get executed. Right. So, but wait a minute. But maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm telling the truth. How do we know that he's lying? The answer is because prophecy is not a lottery. We have this idea in greater society that anyone can be a prophet, right? It's luck of the draw, right? You know, if you happen to spin the 777, you're the prophet, whether or not you're someone who is worthy of that. So if Joseph Smith comes to us and say, "Hey, you know what? I spoke to the angel and he showed me the golden tablets in written form Egyptian, and here's the Book of Mormon. Follow my religion." So he is able to attract a large following. However, if he comes to the Jewish court of law and he says, my name is Joseph Smith and the angel spoke to me and he showed me the golden tablets in written form Egyptian, and here's the Book of Mormon, what would they say to him? Who are you? Why would you have prophecy? Prophecy is another stage of someone's growth. Prophecy is another stage of someone's ascension into spiritual greatness. And the more someone becomes spiritual, the less they become physical, right? Because it's a slide. You're right. It's a sliding scale. Thus, when someone becomes more spiritual, they become less inhibited by, let's say, the rules of nature. So we find in the Talmud these great rabbis that are able to harness the power of their spirituality and thus revive the dead. And it's not a big deal. No one even flinches. Many stories like that. Elijah and Elisha, Elisha revives the dead child. Mm-hmm. Rabbi Pinchas Zera splits the sea. And no one flinches. And no one stops and says, "Oh, wow, this guy must be a deity. Let's bow down to him because he was able to do some miracle." You know why no one flinches? Because the more spiritual someone becomes, the less the power of nature and physicality and the rules of physics apply to him. So thus, they could, have a communication with God. Why? Because they have a soul. And the soul could easily have communication with God, it's just that it's hindered by the body. But the second becomes unhindered, untethered by the body, then what do you have? If it's completely untethered, then you have Moses. Moses descends from the mountain, his face is shining like the sun. Remember that? Mm-hmm. Moses wears the mask. Why does Moses wear the mask? Because people go to look at him. Why couldn't they look at him? Because his face was as bright as the sun. Why was his face as bright as the sun? Because he reached the spiritual apex. On the Mount Rushmore of spirituality, there's one man. That's Moses. Why? Because he totally divested himself of any influence of his physicality. Thus, what was the only influence that he had? Only the influence of his soul. What is the soul? Well, the soul is pure spirituality. Thus, if you have a physical element, can you have an interface with the soul? Can you have an interface with the soul?
Yes.
Well, you can. Your soul can, but not your body. Your body cannot really. What is something in this world that we can't really have an interface with, but it's in this world? What is something that you could look at but can't look at? Well, the internet. The sun. The sun, right? The sun's there. It's free for you to look at, but try looking at it. You can't. Why can't you? Because the sun is comparable to the idea of a soul. Soul illuminates. The sun illuminates, etc. So there's a lot more to say. I know we're not doing justice to all these wonderful ideas, but just real quickly, I don't remember how we got off the topic of history. We'll try to retrace our steps in a second. But let's Moses. So Moses suddenly has just the influence of his soul. No longer under the influence of his body. What happens? The Jews try to look at him. Because they, as being rooted in their physical, they have no way to interface with Moses. It looks like the sun. You can't look at it. Mm-hmm. Thus, the fact that Moses, in the Talmud in Menachos 29b, is able to have a vision of Rabbi Akiva, who appears 1,300 years later. You say, wait a minute. So you said time travel. It's not time travel. It's soul travel. The soul is not limited to time. The soul is also eternal. The soul is not finite. So, but all of us potentially have that power as well. It's just that we have such an overwhelming influence of our physicality that we can't even access the power of our soul. But should we be able to do that, we'd be like Moses. And Moses was able to just fast forward 1,300 years, and he's sitting in the lecture hall of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva died in the 2nd century of the Common Era. Moses has been dead for 1,500 years. How so? Because he had the power of the spiritual. That's what prophecy is, by the way. It's not just some magic, ta-da, I'm a prophet. Just descended upon me, I won the lottery. No, it is a reflection of someone's physical and spiritual breakdown. We good here? So Abraham studies, I think we were talking about Abraham studying Torah, right? So Abraham studied Torah. How did Abraham study Torah? Torah wasn't given until later. That's how we got there. See? That's interesting. We retraced our steps. Thank you. Because Abraham was a prophet. Abraham had such a command of his physicality that he was able to access the power of his soul. Torah was no cinch. Right? Or is it cinch or no cinch? Is it cinch or is it no cinch? If it's really easy, is it a cinch or it's no cinch? I don't remember. It's a cinch. Thank you. It was a cinch. No problem. Okay. So I'm sorry? What do you mean? If it was a cinch or not a cinch? Sorry. But we're good. Okay. Excellent. So these 6,000 years, are going to, so we have the first 2,000 years of chaos. Abraham emerges, that ends the chaos. 2,000 years of Torah. What happens at the end of the Torah? Rabbi Judah the Prince arrives, and he codifies the Mishnah, and then we have 2,000 years of Mashiach. So Mashiach, the word Mashiach is a hot button topic in Jewish life. It's in Jewish. It's a central theme in Jewish philosophy, in Jewish consciousness, etc. One of the 13 principles of faith that Maimonides outlines as being crucial for all Jews is one of them belief in the Messiah. Now we have 2,000 years of Messiah, so we typically think of the Messiah as an individual. Is that right? But here, the Messiah is presented as an idea or as a theme for the last 2,000 years. So indeed, it's both. Messiah is an individual, but it's an individual who's punctuating an entire idea that is taking 2,000 years to develop. And that is the full manifestation of Tikkun Olam, bringing it full circle, bringing the idea of God into the world, fixing the world. The world's flawed. Mashiach is the idea and the individual that are going to contribute to closing this loop and completing that needs to get done in order for the world to reach its conclusion. We good? Now, an important point. Is there a question there? Oh, we'll do as much as we can. Oh, yeah. So we have 200 and no, it's a good question.
Well,
Okay.
you said it's 5775 years.
So I'm writing something down here because you helped me remember that. So let me tell you this cool idea, and this will bring us also full circle. So we find again in the Talmud the following quizzical statement. Now, if I ask you a question, just throw a question on the board. But is Messiah going to come in a righteous, or as a result of a righteous Jewish people or a wicked Jewish people? What do you guys think? Of course, right? That our righteous deeds will usher in the Messiah. Is that right? That's the typical. That's what we would think. We open up the Talmud. The Talmud tells us as follows: the son of David, which is always a reference for the Messiah. Messiah will only come in a generation that's entirely righteous, or a generation that's entirely wicked. What it says is like this: Messiah will come in a generation that's entirely righteous or entirely wicked. What it's telling us, that the Messiah coming need not follow one specific cookie-cutter model. It could come in a generation that's entirely righteous, and it will come. It can come in a generation that's entirely wicked, and it will come as well. In fact, there are those that postulate, myself among those group, that when it says in a generation that's entirely righteous or in a generation that's entirely wicked, what it actually means is that it's in a polarizing generation, a generation of extremes. You have some Jews that are extremely righteous. You have some Jews that are completely sold out, right? Just not involved at all, completely assimilated. And that's a generation where you have Jews, brothers in arms, so to speak, of fulfilling this wonderful mission that our nation was entrusted with. And some of them are totally sold, and some of them are totally sold out. So that's the generation that the Messiah is going to come.
Could I say?
Yeah, go ahead.
Could I say from? Would it be appropriate to say from 48 when Israel became a nation?
Yeah. What about it?
That from the clock of that time, the generation would start. I mean, I'm just.
Yeah, we don't know. What's clear about Messiah, no one has any idea. Anyone who has any idea has been disproven. It's a dangerous black hole to travel down to say, oh, well, I have proof, I have evidence. There's lots of different things, and many of them are misleading. It's like, I'm not going to say what it's like, but it's an exercise in futility. The Talmud itself says it's an exercise in futility to try to decipher all the codes that seem to outline when Messiah is coming. There's a lot of information by way of codes and this and that and different things that seem to contribute to ideas that may seem very plausible, but it's not. It's an exercise that we are advised to not undertake, because what happens if that time period elapsed? You're like, oh, you give up. Rachel, do you have your hand raised there?
Me?
Rochelle, sorry.
It's okay. But you can say Rachel. That's actually my name. That's my.
Well, there you go. Rochelle, I
Very
apologize.
good. I was going to ask. Okay, so there's all these different. When we're talking about different observance levels or whatnot, there's so many different ones that kind of feel like their prophet was the Messiah. Are these people like when people talk about Nachmananon and the
Nachmananon? Who's that?
well, they say that like little
Nachmananon. Okay, so they don't claim that he's Messiah. And in recent years, we've had, let's say, in the 17th century, we had false messiahs like Shabtai Tzvi. That's a false messiah that literally derailed the entire Jewish nation for centuries. We're still suffering today from the after effects of the false messiah. Obviously, JC is considered a false messiah. We have many messiahs. We have Bar Kokhba, maybe perhaps an unrealized potential of a messiah. And we have contemporary times where some Hasidim of the Lubavitch movement have have or claimed or argued overtly or covertly or clandestinely or out in the open that their Rebbe is the Messiah. In fact, there's been a Chabad tradition for centuries now that they're going to have 7 Rebbes. The last one will be the last one will be Messiah. They used to sing Messiah, Messiah. Oh, he's Messiah. Then he died. Then there are those that still uphold to that idea. Well, he's not dead. This and that. We've been down the road before of a Messiah who dies and suddenly he's not dead. He's coming back. It's not a new idea. So yes, there have been not Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. He's not an example. He's an example of something else. He's an example of a Hasidic movement that doesn't have a leader and is still channeling the lessons of the deceased leader. But this is an entire topic. No, it's go ahead. I appreciate that, and I would advise you, if you want to hear more about it, go to my website, rabbiwolbe.com, and Google Messiah or Mashiach, and you'll find I have an entire class on it. All the details, all the prerequisites, everything you want to be Messiah, what you need to do. What are the accomplishments of Messiah? What are the different? Yeah, like there's a lot of very interesting stuff. Some of the history of the false messiahs. Very interesting stuff. So,
have there been any female false messiahs?
My grandfather told me in his days there were over 200 messiahs. So,
I'm sure there've been. Yeah, I think like in every street corner of Jerusalem, there's someone who claims to be Messiah.
And when we went home last year before last, we asked. He wasn't a rabbi, but we asked him a question. I asked him about Messiah.
Yeah.
And he told us we were together. And he said, we are waiting on our Messiah. And when he comes, he's already here in Jerusalem. And we're waiting on him to reveal himself. And we will crown him.
Yeah, but remember, like we said, Messiah is not just an individual. Yeah. It's an idea that has reached its full potential. Thus, we have this idea of a Messiah, a potential individual who could be Messiah, but the community, the nation, has to be worthy of that lofty reality. So if someone who could potentially be Messiah, but he's unrealized because the generation is not worthy of it. I'm sorry? Well, so that's it's right. So right, or not unworthy. So that's the next question. This is also an example of how God manipulates history. So we said that it has to be a generation that's entirely righteous or entirely wicked. So the question is, wait a minute. Why, pray tell, does the Jewish nation in their existence in being entirely wicked, how is that going to contribute towards Messiah? Doesn't seem to make any sense at all, right? What does it mean? Like if the entire generation is wicked, well, why should that usher in Messiah? Doesn't make any sense. So, what's the idea of Messiah? And what's the Jewish community's role in bringing that out? So, let's start from the basics here. So, in Jewish, big picture Jewish history, what is our role? What is the collective national mission statement, the responsibility of the Jewish people? To be a light of the world, light of the nations, right? Or Lagoim. We find in Exodus, you will be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. We find elsewhere that we're a nation that's distinct, that's special. The word holy nation, set apart. We're a holy nation. So we're supposed to be the models for all of humanity. We're still supposed to set an example for everyone. We are supposed to be the moral guardians of the world. We're supposed to be the ones who teach the world about God, continuing Abraham's wonderful idea of fixing the world as our entire nation. We're the descendants of Abraham. We're going to continue his work. Now, how do we do that? How do we teach the world about God?
By living, being an example.
Okay, so that's the best way to do it. The best way for us to teach the world, I need everyone's attention here. It's a little bit of a subtle point. Sorry, I didn't mean to wake everyone up from whatever. I apologize. What years?
We only have 225 years, like you said.
A lot can happen in 225 years. Remember, what happened 100 years ago? How many Jews were living in Israel 100 years ago? 10,000. There's 6 million there now. Even in 1948, a mere 65 years ago, at the founding of the state of Israel, how many Jews were there in Israel? Who knows? 600,000. That's right. Thank you. 600,000. There's 6 million now, a tenfold growth. A lot happened very, very quickly, for good and bad. So, how are the Jews going to teach the world about God? You know how we're going to do it? In one of two ways. Either we're going to be distinct because we're the model, we're God's ambassadors to the world. We teach the world by our piety, by our righteousness, by our morality. We teach the world about God. Or should we choose to renege upon our commitment? Should we reject our special, unique character of being God's people? Should we say, you know what? We're not special. We're like everyone else. We're not chosen. We're just like everyone. What happens then? What gets awakened from the Gentile neighbors? Anti-Semitism. That's the answer here. Anti-Semitism is God's way of ensuring, not with an I, with an E, to make sure that the Jewish people remain distinct. We will remain distinct whether we like it or not, by hook or by crook, come hell or high water. We will remain distinct. We have the choice if we're going to be fully righteous or fully wicked. The end result is Messiah. The end result is the entire world knowing about God. That's the result, regardless of how we do that. However, the path that we choose to get there can either be the path of total righteousness, and then we're the model. We're looked up to. We're the light to the nation. We're the kingdom, priest, and holy nation. We're distinct. We're special. Right? We are it. We're the model. Or we could choose to say, we're not special. And then who's going to make us special? What happens when a Jew says, I'm not special? The Gentile comes and says, you are special. We have a chilling example very recently. And this was predicted. That's why it's not even such a surprise. Because it's again and again in all of Jewish history, same patterns. A Jew says, I'm no different. I'm not special. I want to assimilate. I want to be like everyone else. I don't want to eat kosher. I want to marry whoever I want. I want to be just like the Gentiles. So that was, in fact, established in a Congress in Brunswick in 1844. They had a convention, and they officially said, we no longer need to eat kosher. We can be like everyone else. We no longer need to marry Jewish. We can be like everyone else. We no longer need to be distinct. We're like everyone else. We're not special whatsoever. And a great commentator by the name of Rabbi Israel Salanter, he said that the Jewish people in Brunswick hath repudiated the Shulchan Aruch, the Jewish code of law. They said, we're not special. We're not like everyone else. There's going to come a time where the Gentiles themselves will tell the Jews that you're special. And a mere 90 years later, we have the Nuremberg laws where the Germans themselves say, Jews, you can't marry non-Jews, right? You are different. That's an example of the Jewish people being entirely wicked, entirely rejecting their mission, yet the result's the same. They're distinct. It's just they have to, unfortunately, sadly, and tragically, go through the indignation, the pain, the suffering, the unspeakable horror of the Holocaust. But the result is identical. Thus, Messiah is going to come. We have a final date, and we hope it'll come even sooner. Right? We yearn for it every day. But the Jewish mission will be completed. It will happen. The destination is set in stone. That's going to happen. God's going to manipulate it to happen. However, what's in our hands? If it's going to happen, what's in our hands? Which path are we going to use to get there? Are we going to take the path of entire righteousness? We could do it and everyone will look up to us. We'll be the model nation. We'll be admired. We'll be lauded. We will be the kingdom of priests and holy nation, like the nations. Or, if we unfortunately do choose the other path, we'll get to the same destination as well. The Messiah, that idea, that reality will be completed as well. However, it will not be as full of cream and pie and as exciting and as pleasant as the other path. Thus, big picture Jewish history, and also kind of how faith plays a part in that. We see this again and again. We talk about the destruction of the first temple, destruction of the second temple. All these major events are kind of bringing all out to this final end. Okay, I'll skip that. I'll skip that as well. We're trying to do some quickly here. Okay, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So it's the forebearers of the Jewish nation. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So we already mentioned Abraham. He kicks off this mission. Right, this is where the mission of teaching the world about God. That's very important. Abraham had two sons. What were the names of his sons?
Isaac and Jacob.
Isaac and Ishmael. Is that right? That's right. Now, who's Ishmael? Who's he the father of?
Ishmaelites.
The Ishmaelites. Who are the Ishmaelites? The Arabs, that's right, which are predominantly Muslim now. In big picture Jewish history, Maimonides writes, we look at the other great monotheistic religions, our cousins, so to speak, the Muslims, as partnering with us, because they're also from Abraham.
Right.
They're also doing some of Abraham's work in teaching the world about God. Remember, Maimonides writes, you can walk into a mosque and pray there. No problem. You know why? Because they're not idolaters. They believe the same God we believe in. They went a little awry in the application. The Muhammad Rasul Allah, that part, they went a little off. But their ideas on monotheism are Abraham's and the Jewish people. Same idea. Same idea. Now, Isaac is the one who's the Jewish nation. He's the one. God tells Abraham, Yitzchak, Isaac will be your legacy. Isaac had two children, two boys. They were actually twins. One of them's name was Jacob. The other was Esau, or Esav in Hebrew. Esav is the father of Edom. Edom is the father of Rome. Rome begets the Byzantines, or the Christians. We look at Esav as being manifested by the Christians. Thus, that's the other half. That's also going to contribute towards this big picture goal. But obviously, Jacob is the one who becomes the Jewish people. Right? We have the purest form, and we're still the chosen people. We have our comrades that are in cahoots with us, but we are the ones. We are the direct continuation of Abraham. Now, what happens to Jacob? How many kids does Jacob have?
12.
We know at least of 13. Because he had at least one daughter. 12 sons. Yeah. These 12 sons, how many of them are comprised of Jewish people?
10.
All of them. The 12 tribes. I'm sorry?
Okay, go ahead.
The 12 tribes of the Jewish people are from Jacob. Yeah. You want to get to Joseph's... you're getting too scholarly here. No. Now, thus, we look at Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as being, Abraham was almost perfect in beginning the Jewish people. He had a little bit, went a little off with Ishmael. Ishmael's still kind of on the right track, but kind of veering a little bit off. Isaac as well. He has Jacob. He's honing his recipe, so to speak. It's a little bit, now you have Esav as well. What happens to Jacob? Perfect. All his kids comprise the Jewish people. Well, she's also part of the Jewish people. She doesn't have a tribe. No, she's part. She married, I think.
What year does the Torah end?
No, it's important just for argument's sake here. I'm not trying to say that the Torah is. I'm trying to defend the Torah. The Torah doesn't immediately defend it. However, the Levi didn't have a tribe either. One of the other sons didn't have a tribe either.
Right. That's right.
Like Frederick said. Joseph had two sons that became the other tribe. So there was one of the brothers as well that had a tribe. Yes, go ahead.
I was curious, what year does the Torah end that's equal to the American year?
About 225 years. So you do the math. So 2240 or something like that. 2240.
248 AD.
Oh, CE.
From now.
Right, CE.
Yeah.
2240. So now it's 2015. Add 225, and you have 2,240.
No, I mean. Well, I mean the current Where does the last chapter of the Torah
Oh, where's the last chapter?
Yeah.
Like the death of
Last-
Moses. Is that right?
The last parsha.
I think it's 1312 before the Common Era, I believe. Before the Common Era. That's right. So we're talking roughly, exactly, 3,300 and 27 years ago. Long time, but not that long, I guess. Question.
Ephraim and Manasseh, where do they fit in there?
I'm sorry? Ephraim and Manasseh.
Now, how do they fit in?
They are like Reuben and Shimon. Ephraim and Manasseh, they're like Reuben and Shimon. They are
on the breastplate.
right. That was just the sons of Jacob. That's right. That's right. Now, Jacob has another name. What's Jacob's other name? Israel. Why is Jacob called Israel, not Abraham called Israel? Why was Jacob renamed Israel? Because Jacob was the one who is the fully baked recipe. He finally got it, perfectly honed. Thus, his name becomes synonymous with the entire nation's name. Now, where else do we find in Jewish history where you have two false starts and then you complete? Then it's complete. Find this again and again. We find first temple. What happened to the first temple? Got destroyed. Second temple. What happened to the second temple? In Jewish philosophy, we talk always about this third temple. And what's going to happen to this third temple? Is it going to be destroyed? Never. First temple corresponds to Abraham. Second temple corresponds to Isaac. Third temple corresponds to Jacob, to Israel, to Jewish people. Right? Again and again. We see this again and again. This idea, big picture, where success doesn't follow us the first time we try something. And this is also a big idea for all of life. You try it, Abraham, good, not great. Or great, but not perfect. Isaac, same thing. Jacob, we perfected the recipe. Now, third time's the charm, right?
Yeah.
Now, God tells Abraham, your kids are going to be my nation. Your kids are going to be my nation. Chosen people, right? That obviously connotes that God chose Abraham, when in fact, the opposite is true. Abraham chose God more than God chose Abraham. Because Abraham was the one who, on his own, via the faculty of his own intellect, he deduced the idea of God, and he defended it, and he disseminated it to the masses. Thus, Abraham accepted the role of being God's spokesman. He chose that, and as a result of that, his descendants were chosen to be the people. When we talk about the Jewish attitude or the Jewish character traits, and we look at the Jewish people, even in America today, how many years away from Abraham? We're 3,800 years away from Abraham. And we find still today that if you look just statistics, the Jewish people excel in rates that greatly belie their numbers. 22% of all Nobel Prize winners, which not necessarily the best metric for success, but it's a good metric, are Jews. When the Jews comprise less than 0.2% of all society. So we are overrepresented in Nobel Prizes and any metric you want to do in medicine, in law, in any of the sciences, in entrepreneurs and technology, on the top, in the Forbes list, whatever you want to use for excellence. As a measure for excellence, you find the Jews all the way at the top. Where does that come from? What about us makes us so special? So this is something which has been discussed by a lot of people as a question. The statistics don't lie. It's staggering. In Judaism, we say it because we have the Abrahamic trait, the trait of not accepting what you see as a given, of coming up with an innovation, with developing an idea, with seeing things differently, of having the courage to go against the grain, and defending that, despite the fact that people. And we talk about entrepreneurs today. What marks a great entrepreneur? Someone who says, "I have a much better way of doing things," and everyone says to them, "Well, you're a lunatic." Mm-hmm. Larry Page and Sergey Brin. Everyone knows those names. Mm-hmm. They're the CEO and co-founders of Google. Mm-hmm. Both of them are Jews. Shocking, right? What did they do? They had a new idea. And that's to use an algorithm to search the web. Brilliant. Genius. Right? And they offered to sell. Listen to this, guys. They came to Yahoo and said, Yahoo, listen, we have this wonderful, clever idea. It was called Backrub at the time. Bizarre name. Backrub. Can you imagine? Like a back rubber. That's what it was called at the time. They came to Yahoo and said, we want to sell to you guys just this clever idea for $1 million. Anyone has any idea what Google is worth today as a public company? $384 billion. I think we could argue that was maybe a mistake for Yahoo to say, you know what? But this is an example thing because I'm not interested. But this is an example, and we find this again and again in every area of excellence. Where's it from? We argue, according to Jewish thought, it comes from Abraham. Derived from Abraham. He expressed this kind of determination, innovation, idea, development. He was driven. Us Jews likewise are driven as well. But remember, Abraham chose God more than God chose Abraham. Okay. God tells Abraham, your kids are going to be slaves in a foreign nation. And then they will emerge, they will be redeemed with great wealth. So if you look at the exact point in Genesis, I believe it's chapter 17, verse 1, where God tells Abraham, okay, I chose you, because you chose me, but I chose you. Your descendants will be my people. You'll have the land of Israel. I'll give you the Torah, obviously. This is the nation that's going to complete what you began. Tikkun Olam fits in the world. God tells him, as a prerequisite for this, your kids are going to be slaves in the foreign nation for 400 years, and then they will come out and be redeemed with great pomp and fanfare and wealth. Obvious question is, why is exile a prerequisite for the Jewish nation? God tells Abraham, your kids will be my nation. You'll have it. However, first you got to spend 400 years in Egypt, suffer, be persecuted, and then they'll take you out with miracles and everything, and then you'll be my nation. I'll give you Israel and everything. Why does it have to be like that? It seems like... Go ahead.
To teach them to survive.
So a lot of different ideas are postulated to answer this question. So I want to share my idea here. If we look at the exile, we have the 10 plagues, and Pharaoh's humbled, and we have the plague of the blood, and the frogs, and the lice, and the animals dying, and the wild beasts, and the boils, and then the hail, and the locust, and the darkness, and the death of the firstborn. Right? Seems like it's like Mike Tyson. You guys remember Mike Tyson in the 80s when he was fighting? When he cornered them, he would pummel them. It seems like God is pummeling the Egyptians. Now, what happens to the Egyptians? They get their vein, they're gone. They're gone. What's the point of beating a dead horse? What is the point of completely and utterly humbling and vanquishing the Egyptians? What do you gain with that? Just take the Jews out, pluck them out of Egypt. Mazal Tov, you're good to go. Drop them down on Sinai, give them the Torah, bring them to Israel. That's it. Why do you have to have this entire year in Exodus of the plagues and the whole negotiation back and forth? So it says 3 times, beginning of Exodus. It says, "Leman yedim Mitzrayim k'ani Hashem," that the Egyptians shall know that I am God. God rationalizes with Moses the reason why we will completely and utterly decimate and destroy the Egyptians and humiliate them and humble them is so the Egyptians should know that I am God. Question: who cares about the Egyptians? Isn't this all about the Jews? Isn't this part of the plan? Abraham, your kids will be Jewish, be exile. Okay, we'll take you out. You'll have. Why is it about Egypt? Who cares about Egypt? Well, clearly, but why? Huh? Okay, but so what do you gain by humbling him? So like this. So to answer all these questions, go ahead. Well, Esau's something. Esau's that's a different nation. That's Edom. That's something else.
Would that be a part of Egypt?
No, there's a different people. So we have a slew of questions. Let's try to answer them. I don't expect you guys to remember all this. This is not on a final exam. But it's a slew of questions. I'll try to answer them here. And whilst answering them, we'll try to remind you of all the questions. So, like this. For us to be successful in our mission, we have to be crafted and honed, molded and formed into a very unique, specific beast. When I say beast, I mean like that, in the figurative sense. For us to be successful, the Jewish people, to be successful in our mission, we need to be a very specific kind of nation. A nation that is willing to be subjugated, to be subjected, to be restricted, to be withheld, have obstacles, to have restrictions on our practice, on what we can eat, what we can do, what we can this, right? The Torah, you look at the Torah, what does the Torah have more than anything else? Restrictions. 365 things we can do, right? What we can eat, what we can drink, who we can sleep with, where we can live, how we can, everything. Details, restrictions. That is by design, because that is going to enable us to fulfill our mission. However, in order to be willing to accept that, in order to be completely accept the dominion of God, we have to be formed into that kind of nation. God tells Abraham, your kids have to be prepared. They have to go through some sort of education, some sort of boot camp to become ready for the big leagues. You know what that boot camp is? Egyptian exile. Exile is no fun. Slavery is absolutely no fun. Being a servant, being subjected to Pharaoh is no fun. But what does it teach you? It teaches you that you are nothing. You are nothing on your own. You have to rely on your master for what you eat, what you drink, when and if you could sleep, what you could live, what you could do, everything. The Jewish people spent 400 years, or 210 to be precise, of living that kind of life. And what happens? Moses comes. Moses says to them, you know what? Why don't we leave? And they got people, they're like, they were so down and out. They were so disenfranchised and disenchanted and discombobulated and discontent. And they said, we can't even imagine any other life. We want this idea, God ain't talking to us. They were totally under the dominion of Pharaoh. What's going to happen now what's going to happen now with this nation? They're going to leave. What's going to happen to their loyalty? They're loyal to Pharaoh now. They're completely subjected to him. What's going to happen to this is that it's going to be transferred. It's not going to be eliminated. This is the way God intended. It's going to be transferred. Now you are no longer loyal to Pharaoh. You're still loyal. You're loyal to God. How is that going to happen? You know what's going to happen? It's going to happen where the Egyptians themselves will recognize that God is in complete control. Thus, the 10 plagues are humbling Pharaoh. Pharaoh will know that I'm God. What happens when Pharaoh knows? Everyone else knows as well. What happens to the Jewish people? They see Pharaoh being totally humbled. They see him being bombarded from every angle, from every side. They see God's complete control and dominion. The first 3 plagues from the ground, from subterranean, right? The first 2 are from the water, and the next one is from the earth. The next 3 plagues are all around us, right? Boils, death of the animals, wild beasts. The next 3 plagues are all from above, from the sky. Right? Hail rains down from the sky. It's dark, and the locust flies. We will know, and cover the sky, cover the face of the sun. Thus, we see God is in control of what's below us, what's around us, what's above us. And then the final nail in the coffin is God has the keys to death and life itself. This is a complete education to the Jewish people. It builds their faith profile on one hand, and they see the fallacies of Pharaoh's dominion. Thus, what happened to the Jewish people? So, who is it for? Who is it for? This subjugation of Pharaoh, this humbling of Pharaoh. It's for Pharaoh, but ultimately it's for the Jewish people, because now the Jewish people can emerge from this. They are ready for the dance. They are ready to accept the Torah a mere 50 days later. They have this attitude of accepting God as the power that ought to be revered, and no other power ought to be revered. They are ready to accept the Torah as the tool that's going to bring them to fulfilling this mission. Thus, it had to be a prerequisite. God tells Abram, listen, there's got to be trade-offs. There's no free ride. If you want to accept this, you want to accept that your children will be my nation and are going to fulfill the mission that you start, that you care about so deeply, that you are willing to give your life up on, you should know there's going to be a trade-off. That trade-off is going to be they're going to spend 400 years in a foreign land, and it will not be easy, but when they emerge, they'll be fully ready for combat, fully ready for faith, fully ready to fulfill this mission. Okay. Another idea that we find again and again in Jewish history. So we see Joseph and the whole tragedy and Egyptian exile. And in big picture, we talk about 4 different exiles in Jewish history. We have the Egyptian exile that we just mentioned. We have the Babylonian exile. Babylonians destroy the temple. They go to exile in Babylon for 70 years. We have the Persian exile. We have the Greek exile, the whole Hanukkah story. We have the Roman exile, which is the exile that we're still in today. Destroy the temple, send the Jews into disarray, disassemble the Jewish central leadership, etc., etc. What's the idea with all these exiles? Why are we always wandering? How come the Jewish people can't just settle down? Why is it? The Torah tells us that this is by design. Why? Again, we see Jewish history. The Assyrians come. We the Jewish we lose the 10 tribes. We have we're under the thumb of the Babylonians and the Persians. Then the Greeks come in and they set up shop and they try to influence our ways. They cause much pain and suffering to the Jewish people. They're gone. The Romans show up and they just attempt to disassemble the Jewish people in its entirety. Hadrian in the year 135, as we all know. And we're still today. We go from France, and France in 1306 kicks us out. We go to England. 500 years we can't live in England. Everywhere, the Spanish Inquisition, the Almohads come. They kick Maimonides, our great protagonist. He has to leave in the year 1150. We're constantly bouncing around from place to place. We never settle down. We're always in exile. What's that idea?
Because of disobedience.
Okay, so that's that. Well, I'm sure there's lots of answers to that question. Some of the answers are like this: we have to be insular as a nation. We have to be distinct as a nation. Yet we have to have an interface with all the other nations. Remember, if we're going to affect change on a global scale, we're only 14 million people. Okay, there's basically one Jew for every 1,000 humans. So insignificant that in the year 2000 in China, they made a census. They counted how many people live in China. As we know, we do a census every 10 years, right? And they came up to a huge number. Now, as we know, every time you make a huge census, you have a margin of error, right? Some people you don't count, some people you count twice, right? There's always a margin of error. So the margin is only 3 to 4%. The margin of error for the Chinese census in the year 2000 this is one of my favorite statistics of all time. What's the margin of error? Plus or minus 48 million people. Think about that. The number that they came to as to the number of how many people live in China in the year 2000, it's a range of 96 million people. Think about that. Just stop for a second and think about that. Insane, right? Thus, you can fit 7 times the entire Jewish nation into the margin of error of China. Yet, you go to NewYorkTimes.com, how many stories do you find about Israel, about Jews? Tens. From today, we're on the front cover of every newspaper. Right? We're a big deal. How is it possible that we affect so much of the global attention is placed upon the Jews, yet we're so insignificant?
You're on the newspaper.
Well, maybe, but it's not all positive. It's a remarkable thing. So one of the ideas is that we have had our fair share of travels throughout the world. We have made an impact on every society that we have encountered. Thus, we're in the collective consciousness of everyone, the entire world. We have a microphone to talk. We have a platform to broadcast. We have the world's attention. We are a nation that's uniquely situated to affect global change. That's one idea. Once again, it falls very much nicely in line with the big picture. Additionally, if we are going to be, this is another idea from the exact opposite venue. If we're going to be the perfect ideal nation, if we're going to be the people that are going to change the world, we have to be a very unique nation. We have to be capable of amassing or collecting within ourselves all the positive attributes of the entire world. For it to be a perfect nation. Well, how do you be a perfect nation? We got to be comprised of perfect qualities. A nation that is remarkable because it demonstrates qualities of perfection. We have to assemble amongst ourselves all the qualities of all the nations. Thus, we spend a few hundred years in Spain. We acquire the positive character of Spain. God says, okay, your time here is done. You're out. Go to Morocco. You go to France. Go to Germany. Go to Belgium. Go to England. Go to Russia. And amass. Like it's like we're just taking the positive from all of them, and then once again bring it all back into Israel. The entire nation comes back to Israel. What do you have? You have this eclectic mix, but that has within it all the positive qualities. Thus, our time in exile can also be learned or viewed in Jewish thought as not being a way to influence, rather a way to be influenced from the people that we encounter. Okay, so how much time do we have, guys? Here, how far can we go? I'm sorry.
I'm falling asleep, not because of you, because of me.
It's
I've
fine.
been at work since 6.
I apologize. So should we go till 9 or should we stop here? Or go to 9:30?
It's up to the group. I'm fine.
Let's do 10 more minutes. Talk about some more significant. We didn't get out. We still have many, many, many hundreds of years left to go. So like I said, we get some themes, but not all the details. Now, the Exodus is very significant. The entire Exodus story, if you look at the Torah spans all the years from Adam, even before Adam, till the death of Moses. The first book of the Torah deals with basically 3,000 years. Around, I guess 2,000 years. 2,000 or 3,000 years. 2,500 years, basically. The next 4 books, so that would be Genesis is about 2,500 years. You would assume that Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy would also comprise 2,500 years. When in fact, from Exodus, just from the second chapter in Exodus all the way to the end, is only 40 years. That's it. 40 years. So clearly what the Torah is telling us that the lessons that we could take from those 40 years are so dense and so unique and so spectacular that we're going to tell it to you in such detail. Whereas the preceding 2,500 years, you can subsist with one book, the book of Genesis. We find the Exodus. What happened to the Jewish people of the Exodus? So they left Egypt. Okay, where'd they go? They had the splitting the sea. We know that story. They go, they split the sea. Fine, fantastic. They continue. They go to Mount Sinai. They encamp on the foot of the mountain, Mount Sinai, on the first day of the second month of the first year of their Exodus. What happens at Mount Sinai? What's major, significant event happens at Mount Sinai?
Moses. That's why they got the law.
So Moses, I said Moses, we have a lifting mountain, we have Moses, we got the law. What happened? So you're all right. You're also right. You're also right. However, many, many, many people have, instead of reading the book, watched the movie. Always a mistake. Got to read the book. What actually happened was an event that has never before happened and never happened since. A singular event, one-time event in all of human history. And that is what's called national revelation or collective prophecy. The Jews got to the mountain. They prepared for a couple of days. Moses goes up to heaven. Goes up to the mountain. What happens? You said the mountains, the flame, all this of striking visuals that happens as outlined in Exodus chapter 20 and Deuteronomy chapter 4. It's repeated twice because it's so significant. They experience prophecy. Who's they? Everyone. Every man, woman, and child. Now you say, Rabbi, wait a minute. You told us a little bit earlier, prophecy is not dispensed like candy or gumballs. Something you got to earn. This is the exception. This is the time where everyone, all of them, man, woman, child. The Talmud goes as far as to say that even children in utero says, no, you got to know how to decipher Talmud. That's what it says. Don't think of it in the simplistic sense. It says that the women's stomach became like glass, and even the children in utero had prophecy. Does that mean that it became glass and you punched it with a knife? If you took a hammer to the glass, it would shatter? No. But it means that this experience was shared by everyone and everything. There are Jewish sources that talk about the souls, even souls that have yet to be born, to experience that as well. This is an exception to the rule. This is a time where temporarily the entire nation is granted the spiritual ability to accept prophecy. And what do they hear? They have the Ten Commandments. And they freak out, they die, and they're brought back to life. A lot of details happen. But this is an event that is the most significant event in all of human history. I'll explain to you why. It's significant because, like I said, it's the only time it's ever happened. So what? So what happens if you see prophecy? What happens if you see prophecy? Pretty remarkable, right? Tell your kids about it, right? What happens was that no longer are we believing Moses that he's a prophet because of his own personal activities. From now on, we believe Moses, subsequently, he's to teach us the entire Torah. From then on, he's to teach us the entire Torah. We believe him. This is the word of God. We have the book Torah. We can all hold the Torah now. How do we know that Moses is a true prophet? Maybe he was a charlatan. Maybe he's a snake oil salesman. How do we know he's not lying? All of them experienced prophecy alongside of him. All of them heard Moshe alei lahar, Moshe come up to the mountain. There was no doubt. It was absolute clarity. In order to achieve that clarity, remember, when God does things, he does them well, does them perfectly. What God's going to give the Jewish people of Torah, it's going to be in a way that's going to survive everything. No matter how much chaos you throw at the Jewish people, Torah will survive. Jewish people have faced more chaos than any other nation by orders of magnitude. Yet we're still around and we're growing and vibrant. Why? Because that's the way God set it up. It's going to be impervious to any challenges. The only way for it to succeed is if there's absolute clarity from everyone. Moses is a true prophet. God really exists. This is real. This is true. This is not a bunch of baloney. Right? And also, importantly, this is not false. It's impossible to falsify. Us, we're working 3,300 years afterwards. So we say, wait a minute, how do we know the Torah is true? How do we can ask those questions. Those are legitimate questions that a lot of people have asked. Yet we find that all of the religions, all of them, share a commonality. And that is, religions start with revelations. How do you start a religion? So if you want to start a religion, Idiot's Guide to Start a Religion, you have to have a revelation. That could be Joseph Smith in the mountains of New York saying, or claiming, alleging, that an angel came to him and gave him this golden tablets that no one's ever seen, written in Reformed Egyptian, a language no one's ever heard of, and he translated them into the Book of Mormon. That's a revelation. Who experienced that? Allegedly. One guy. Muhammad, one guy. Paul of Tarsus, one guy. Every religion, one guy has an experience convinces the masses. Religions begin with revelations. All religions begin with revelations. The Jewish people also begins with revelations. However, the revelations that happen to the Jewish people happen not to one man who convinced a group of followers, it happened to the entire nation. And that is something which is impossible to falsify. There's no way I can convince you something you didn't see. There's no way for the Jewish people to accept Moses accept the words of Moses, and we're still fulfilling the laws of Moses. On that door, there's a mezuzah. Where's the mezuzah from? From the book of Moses. There's no way the Jewish people would have perpetuated the Torah if they were not entirely convinced that it was 100% true. And in it, it describes in detail this experience that everyone must have had, or else they would not have accepted it. And in fact, the Torah goes out on a limb. And I want you to read this. If you read one thing in Deuteronomy, one verse, go to chapter 4, verse 32 and 33, it's 2 verses, where it calls this out and it makes a prediction, a bold prediction that will send chills down your spine. Probably not. But it will, if you think about it, it will call to attention what's just the remarkable nature of this event. It says, God challenges you. I want you to go from one end of the world to the other end of the world. From all of human history, has this ever happened, or has it ever been claimed to have happened? God's telling us that national revelation, national prophecy has never happened, besides for this one event, and no one will even claim that it would have happened. The Torah is saying, we are so confident this is a one-time in all of human history event, that if it does happen again, we take the Torah and scrap it. We know it's not true. We know it's not true. Full confidence. Because why? The Torah says it'll never happen. And now, for the payoff. How's everyone doing? Doing well?
How are you?
Fantastic. Let's assume the Torah was written by men, for argument's sake, or a collection of men. Really clever, we could assume, right? Really clever people. They concocted a story. They fabricated a hoax of national revelation. Yet, the very same authors write that it'll never happen again. They were clearly intelligent. If they did it on their own, if they fabricated it on their own, they know it can happen again. Thus, why would they easily falsify their own work where they clearly intended for it to be believed as what it claims to be, the word of God as dictated to Moses? Why would they say that nothing like this will ever claim to have happened when they themselves know that they perpetuated this own myth on their own? Thus, the only conclusion that we can draw is that indeed it did happen, and the reason why it was never claimed to have happened by any other nation, especially a nation that wants to, or any religion that wants to claim legitimacy, why would you say there's only one guy? Let's say 10 guys, or 100 guys, or 50, or 500 guys, or 500,000, or 603,000, 500,000 adult males, which is what the Torah claims. We assume a tremendous amount of females, plus children. We have at least 1.8 million people if we disinclude adults over the age of 60. If you want to compensate for adults, then it could be any number above 2 million, probably. That's what the Torah says. 1.8 million people up to the age of 60 experience this event. It's impossible to claim this unless it actually happened. Thus, national revelation, this experience is so significant. We touch it on the mezuzah every day. We wear it in our tefillin every day. We say it in the Shema twice every day, once in the morning, once at night. We declare it every Shabbat. It is the foundation of all the holidays, because this is where we know we are right. This is our evidence, and we retouch this at every point, because this revelation, we know that Moses is a true prophet, we know that God really exists, and we know that the Torah is real. Okay, so we got another cool, just nice, a cute little addendum. We'll stop with this. Cute little addendum to this. Moses is called the father of all prophets. Father of all prophets. Why is Moses called the father of all prophets? I'll tell you like this. If Muhammad the merchant came to us and said, "Hey, I'm a prophet," what do we say to him? One guy. What if you're lying? How do we know you? Maybe you're not lying, but maybe you are lying. Was Moses your daddy, right? Joseph Smith or Paul or any prophet or self-proclaimed prophet. We say, well, we weren't there. We have no idea. Moses is a verified prophet. If Moses was on Twitter, he would have the blue check next to him. Verified. He's a verified prophet, right? Someone's laughing there, right? Someone's on Twitter, right? Moses is a verified prophet. If Abraham came to us and Abraham says, "You know what? I'm a prophet," what would we say to him? If we were intellectually honest, we would say to him, "How do we know you're right? How do we know you're right? How do we know?" Every prophet that comes to us and says, "I'm a prophet," if we are logical skeptics, which we are, we say, "I don't know if I can believe you. I don't know if I can believe you. Maybe you're lying." Moses is a verified prophet. Thus, Moses is the father of all prophets because we only believe in Abraham as a prophet because Moses told us. We only have Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, etc. because Moses told us, not in the record. The record, they're no different than Muhammad, essentially. Thus, and even subsequent prophets, Moses lays the groundwork of who can fit in this category. So Samuel, the prophet Samuel, we consider a prophet. Why? Because of his own accord? No. Because Moses told us these are the qualifications of a prophet. Samuel fit the bill. Thus, Moses posthumously told us Samuel's a prophet. Moses is indeed the father of all prophets. Let's stop here, guys. We got pretty far, but not far enough. We have part 2 coming next Wednesday. Is that right?
This one.
This upcoming Wednesday? Fantastic. I hope you all